Welcome to the webinar. We've got a little bit of a new platform that we're trying to lay out this today. Most of you probably joined us on our Zoom webinars, but we're trying a new platform called Slingshow. Let us know what you think throughout the webinar because we're testing it out. It's got some different capabilities, but it's still early stage. But we want to give it a go and see what it was like. But if you're joining us, let us know where you're joining us from, what city, what country, what province or state, and what the weather's like. I'm out on the West Coast right now, and it feels like fall has officially landed out on the West Coast. It's a little cold, it's a little rainy. I had to dig my kids' rain boots out of our garage today because that was an official new thing, and they were really excited about it. I was not so excited about it. I was excited for the rain, but not fall. Not fall. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, I'm in Ottawa, and it's hot here. Usually in Toronto, but I'm in Ottawa today, and it's a hot one out today.
No. It feels like fall has descended already. It's weird. I don't like it. I wanted some more summer. Supposed to go camping next week, and it's going to be cold.
Oh, man. Well, we got a lot of people joining us.
All right. Here we go.
Great.
Omaha, Surrey, UK, Victoria, BC, College Station, Toronto, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Ooh, I've been to Myrtle Beach. It is beautiful there. Oh, so nice. Toronto, you experiencing heat wave. I think the heat waves have just been flowing through Canada at different intervals. Everyone's getting heat waves at some point in time. We got someone from Denver, Alberta, Toronto. All right, Vancouver. Sweet. Well, let's sort of start rolling. It's 2 minutes past the hour, and we've got a lot to cover. Kwesi and I, mainly Kwesi. I'm just kind of here to direct things and make sure that Kwesi doesn't go off the rails. But I'm going to turn things over to Kwesi and let him introduce himself and kind of talk about why we're here, what we're doing, and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay. I'm Kwesi Thomas. Nice to meet everyone. Let's start with, the resume stuff at the start as usual. I'll tell you where I've been, what I've done. I started working at Nortel a long time ago, so one of Canada's early large tech firms. In HR, bouncing around between HR and finance, and then mainly doing stock options at that time, oddly enough. So I know a lot about stock options from that time. Then I moved over to BlackBerry and joined the Total Rewards team in a hybrid role that kind of sat between HR and finance. Again, I like numbers. At least I did way back then. That sat between HR and finance. And I was responsible for talking about, translating HR numbers to the finance people and finance people to HR. And it was a weird role, but I enjoyed it. And then along came this opportunity to build recognition programs at Nortel, at BlackBerry. And, being that I liked projects and then the opportunity was there, I jumped on the chance and got to that's probably 13-ish years ago now, a long time ago, maybe a little less. I got to start building a recognition program when there really wasn't a lot of recognition programs out there. Some of the bigger players around there now were smaller players then. And we actually ended up building our own recognition platform with the help of a company named Merits back then. So we built the platform and points and the whole line. And then it's really started to get into recognition and a bit of employee culture. I had a weird title. I think it was called Manager Global Recognition at one point. But I had all the some people would call the culture type programs at that time, including things like Ice Cream Fridays or giving away gifts. And at one point I was running a store, and there's lots of different stuff we were doing at that point for recognition. And then when I left BlackBerry, I was leading Total Rewards by the time we left, and I joined up Manulife, which we won't talk about for a very brief time. Found out that I like staying in high tech very quickly, and I joined Shopify when it was very smaller team, and helped grow and build the HR team and actually the Shopify team. I think we were just shy of 200, 300 employees when I joined, and left when there were about 2,000, just under 2,000. So that was interesting. That was building HR. And every program you can name by fire. Like we did that in, months, not weeks. Sorry, sometimes weeks and months instead of days, years. So everything from Total Rewards, comp plans, RSU plan, recognition program, you name it. We kind of built it all very, very, very quickly, incentive programs. I joined right before the IPO, so there was a lot of stuff going on there. And then since then, long story. Since then, I've been on my own sort of, I got sort of the entrepreneurial bug, and I've been trying to help small and medium businesses grow, especially in the HR area. So I've been helping either sometimes just in Total Rewards and sometimes broader in HR, and then for a couple of companies, I've led everything from customer success to sales as they kind of work their way through the growth path. And I really enjoy helping teams grow and building teams and cultures. And I think I've since I've been stepping out on my own, I think I've really enjoyed helping companies grow through that. And then also sometimes helping some of the big guys like the banks, et cetera, when they call, because but that's me. Hopefully today we talk about building culture and how it's changing.
Yeah, I mean, and so this is why we wanted Kwesi to join us. And if this is your first time joining our webinars, I'll give myself a quick introduction as well. My name is Noah Warder. I'm the head of people over here at Gusto. And every month I'm talking to people like Kwesi about, things that impact us as HR and people leaders. So whether this is building culture remotely or in hybrid roles like Kwesi and I are going to talk about today, or previously we've talked about building resilience in your teams and how to take care of yourself as an HR people leader. And next month we're going to be joined by Decium to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. And so, we're talking about all the topics that are really important to people leaders today. And especially, as things have progressed with COVID and all that kind of good stuff. So, really excited to talk to Kwesi. First time using Slingshot. So if you have questions, you'll sort of see in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a view QA. So you can add your questions in there, and we'll try and answer those as we sort of progress, and also be time at the end of this conversation to answer all your questions. And so, let's talk about building culture today, and then next month we'll talk about the DE&I, also a big topic. But today with Kwesi, with his vast experience with building teams, supporting new companies, supporting some of the bigger companies, all in building culture, and doing that through various programs in different ways. And so, Kwesi, super excited to have you join us, super excited to get there. And Kwesi and I got to have a little chat last week about sort of this, what we wanted to talk about today. And there's no silver bullet to building culture, right? It's different for every organization. Your culture is really the DNA of your company, and it's different for every organization because it's all your people, it's your values, it's your mission, it's all that kind of good stuff. And sorry, someone's just pinging me on Slack right now. And like I said, there's no silver bullet for this right now, but there are some key things that every company can do to really build that culture and make sure that you're supporting your teams and doing all that kind of stuff. And so Kwesi and I got to chat about that a little bit, and we kind of pulled out three things that we thought we wanted to chat about. And so one of those, Kwesi, I really want you to talk about is communication and communication processes and how you do that as an organization, because a lot of companies were in office, now they're remote. Some of them are thinking of going back to offices or doing hybrid models. And so communication is that big thing. So let's dig into that a little bit.
I would start with so I'm going to back up a little bit before and say you're building the culture that's right for the organization that you're running. And so a lot of times we try to put some, that's what good culture is, and that's what good bad culture is. And quite frankly, if you're a culture at a bank, very different than the culture at your 200-person or 100-person startup versus, a company that's being very creative, or somebody who's working in movie and television production. So the culture you're building really has to do with the environment and the team and the direction you're trying to build the culture in, right? So you're right. There is no silver bullet, and for me, there's no right. There's bad culture. Let's not hide it. There's bad culture. There's no right other than it being right for the organization. That's my perspective. And so right now, with the change from in office to being remote, the big challenge is communicating, right? And for me, that means more about not just the one-way communication. We have very little ways of getting true feedback without sending out more surveys, and we all love more surveys coming our way that we have to answer. And so finding a way to communicate on a regular basis at sort of all levels of the organization, so that is your normal broadcasts, your emails, your et cetera, down to your one-on-one meetings and how those are happening. And I think spending the time to be purposeful about how those are structured, how those are, how often those are happening, the norms for that within your culture is important, because that to me is your only, one of your only ways of really getting information back and forth. And it's two ways, not just one. And so for me, I'd be taking a good hard look, especially if I got a big enough team to have communications people in the organization, about how we help the team do that. I'll give you an example. When I was at Shopify, I was working in Toronto. A lot of the employees that were reporting or working with me were in Ottawa, and so though I was going every other week or often enough there, every meeting we did was a video call. I had headphones all the time, and even if it wasn't a meeting, I said, "Hey, you around?" They say, "Yeah, I'm around." Let me just grab my headphones, and they turn on their video and we chat. Now that was a norm that we had kind of built into the culture, so it wasn't like an awkward thing. But you got to find ways in the communication to build norms that are going to help the team. Also recognize, that's my last point on this one. Also recognizing that where there are some challenges, right? So there are some employees. I won't stereotype developers as an example, but some employees who don't want to get up in front of 50 people on a video conference and be front and center because they don't want to be. That's their personality it doesn't go well with that. But finding ways to really have frequent, open communication, especially coming back to you, is important.
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit there of like also knowing your team, but not everyone's going to appreciate the same style of communication. And so some people are going to want, those video conversations, that more face-to-face interaction. And some people are going to want the more asynchronous communication. They're going to want the Slack messages. They're going to want the videos so they can sit there and process the information and then craft a appropriate response. And I've experienced this with other companies that I've worked with of like, there are some people that like, you send them a message like, hey, let's jump on a video chat. And that to them is like, oh, dear God, what have I done wrong? Instead of being like, hey, can you answer this quick question for me over Slack? Take your time. And so knowing who you're talking to and developing those different ways of communication. I think you mentioned this, Kwesi. It's like you had one company that you were kind of consulting with, and they did something with the subject lines in their email that was unique to them. I'd love to like share that example with people because I love that. That was great.
I don't know, like I'm allowed to name the company, but what they had done is they had really prescribed, or the communication team had prescribed some norms in the subject line for the team when they had moved to remote during COVID. And so, some of the things were, if you wanted a response now, or if this was just information, or, whatever, there was an action that was required at the start of the email, or not an action, but a verb, hey, need you to do this, or just FYI. And if there was a timeline, the timeline also went in there. Hey, need this, reply and the time. Now, it will seem silly, but that allowed people to really, because right now everything's more emails. It's because you're not seeing them in the hallway. There's just more emails. It allowed them to really hone in on what actions needed to take place. They also got really, really, really judicious about not copying the world. If you were copied, it's because you actually needed to know it, not because it was easy enough or better to just copy more people, right? So, and similarly, if it was just an email to say thank you, you put it in the subject line, right? And so you really got down to that subject line, told you what you needed to do. Not that you shouldn't still read the email, but that helped, sort through the mess of emails and really got clear for people what they needed to do.
I love it. And it sets the expectations, because I think that's the biggest problem is like, and especially as like executives in your leadership team, like often not, more than not, they're working all strange hours. And especially when you have different time zones, people are sending emails early in the morning or late at night. And sometimes people feel compelled to answer those emails, getting them at 11 p.m. or not. So having those expectations in the subject line of like, just FYI, no response needed, or please respond within 48 to 50, 72 hours. Just like, that's like, okay, I can take my time with this. That just, I love setting those expectations up front. And I think that'll help a lot, like you said, with communication and making people feel that they don't have to be on all the time. Correct. Which we've all kind of been a little bit the past year.
Setting those norms or those boundaries for the team in terms of what's expected. We were in the communication world, but you just touched on it in terms of when's it okay to turn off? Like, because it's much easier to turn off when you just get in your car and leave. And those of you who've worked in companies that hand you a phone, you kind of feel like you haven't left because your phone's still there and you're still getting messages. But making it known when they can turn off or turn on and what's normal, acceptable, that's important. And I just want to touch on one thing. Last on communications, talking to your executive about how they communicate is crazy important because they set the tone. And a lot of times as execs or leaders or whatever level of the company you want to say that is, they don't realize that when a VP sends out an email that says something, it does stir up not just the action, but stir up a bunch of intenseness that's not or power behind that's not there when from other emails. And so having them understand, hey, if you just say, want to know how we did last month in an email, as an exec, that puts people in panic all night trying to figure out if they got to do that right now. People turn off their laptops and start working. And you may have said that casually, hoping to get something the next 2 days, right? So I think you're really outlining what you expect right now is important for everyone.
Yeah, I like that, and that's gonna reduce your burnout. It's gonna make people happier. Setting those expectations makes everyone happier, even the executives who don't realize. I remember talking to a founder one day and just letting him know that, like, look, every time you ask for something, the weight behind that ask is exponential from everyone else in your team. And he's like, what do you mean? Right. He's like, it's just an off the cuff of like, hey, it'd be kind of cool if we looked at this. I'm like, yeah, but everyone you just said that to now thinks they have to drop what they're doing and go do what you just said. And they're like, no. And I was like, yes, because you're the founder. You're the executive. You're the person that says that they want this, and you're the boss. And therefore, people are going to go do that. And it was such a light bulb moment for them. They're like, okay. And so they had to switch the way it asked them. They had to do it would be really great if we could research this. When we all have the time, let's put it in the backlog and put a priority on it. And, maybe in a week or two, someone from the team can take the time and research this. They had to add that little bit of extra expectation on their asks. And it made the whole team happier because then they all realized what the founder was actually asking for. We've got one question.
Go ahead.
Oh, just a quick question in the chat of this one's from Shelly. No email or no meeting Fridays. Has anyone had any success with this? Have you seen this, Kwesi? Or maybe it's no meeting Wednesdays or whatever. Have you seen this with any of the companies you're working with? And anyone in the chat, please chime in. Do you do this in your company? Do people like it?
I've definitely seen various versions of no email Fridays, no meeting Wednesdays, all ways of trying to curb the volume of work and allowing people to focus and actually do some work, focus on the work they have to do. I've seen some success with companies with this, and some who have really where this has caused more problems than good. From my perspective, if this is going to happen, it's got to be a collective action that the team or the group or the company, something other than an individual, right? Because if it's an individual, they're fighting against the other people still trying to book meetings or trying to still send emails. It's got to be collective. And when it's collective and truly adopted, I've seen it very successful. That's one of the things we get. It's very hard to find time doing. It's time to actually work. One of the an executive I was working with, he was based in Singapore. When I joined him, he was really big on this on a principle called Time to Think, or the book called Time to Think. And he would carve out time, but he would make sure he would tell all our exec team, hey, Mondays from this time to this time, there's no meetings, there's no nothing. This is your time to think. He's like, he really believed his exec team gets paid to think and doesn't actually spend any time thinking. So he carved that out. It worked well because he carved that time out. So I think, if you're going for an email etiquette or a meeting etiquette, it's got to be widely adopted by the group involved. Otherwise, it just fights itself. But it can't have real good success.
And I think there's the I'm gonna mispronounce your name. I am so sorry. Julia mentioned that the senior leadership team role modeled it. And so that if you don't have that senior leadership team doing it, no one else is going to do it. Doesn't matter how much HR pushes or anybody else. If your executive team is not role modeling the behavior that they want or the behavior that you want to see in the organization, it's not going to happen. This applies to all things.
Yeah. And what's funny? As HR leaders, often we think that means we have to get somebody on the leadership team or some of them to agree and be like, yeah, we're supportive. I don't know if anyone else would agree. I found very little success in my own career when we try to force them or we're trying to get them on board with something. Even somehow in how you communicate with them, if they can buy into it because they think it's their idea or they're really bought into it personally, because that way it's not just role model, they actually have to, preach it, talk it, right? And so for me, things like, particularly when it comes to culture, your leadership team has to not just buy into a deck that we've shown them or a PowerPoint we've shown them that says these attributes are what we want to follow. You literally need them to help define these culture things and then buy into it themselves so that they will lead it and stay true to it. Otherwise, as you're building this remote culture that we need to build now, they'll constantly be undercutting it in small ways that you don't realize. So, definitely executive. Buy-in is the word we're using, but I truly buy in. Like there.
Yeah. Like I liked how you said it, like you kind of make them think it's almost their idea. That they're like, you know what, this is something I'm gonna lead. You want the leadership team to lead that new process and lead that new initiative, whatever you want to call it. It's something that they want to do. Like they've created that mentality of like, this is what I want as a leader and for my team. And you said it with your example from the executive that was in Singapore. He wanted his executive team to have thinking time, so he carved it out. He's the one that was like, no, this is the no meeting time. You all take this time to think and work.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I'm going to address Ken's question right now. Back to the email etiquette question. Any tips to how can that be adapted to Slack or Microsoft Teams? Pretty much zero email. And I know a lot of companies are trying to get away from email and use Slack because it's a little bit more real time. One thing that we do here at Gusto is that we've created sort of custom Slack fields, so everyone gets to put in their time zone, their work hours, their blocks in meetings. They also do that in their Google Calendar, so like times that they're not available and all that kind of stuff. And that really helps with like around the expectations around meetings and stuff like that. But I've seen other organizations, and there's a really good article about it. I can't grab it right away, but using Slack statuses of like in deep work. So don't disturb them unless you really need to. It's really important. Or, like available for meetings or out to lunch, and like using the Slack status to sort of build that expectation of like, I'm away, or I'm in deep work, or I'm in a meeting, just so people know and they understand when you're going to get a response back. And the other thing, and this is just a major pet peeve of mine, is when you do direct message somebody in Slack or Teams, don't start with a, hey, how you doing? And then stop there. Don't do that. That's say, hey, how you doing? And then finish with what you're asking, because otherwise I'm just sitting there waiting for what you need.
Yeah. You can experiment with that first line, because often that first line is the preview line that shows up in Slack or on the phone, etc. So maybe that, play with that preview line as the action line, then say, hey, how you doing? Right. Just like, I struggle sometimes with, Slack a bit, as Noah will tell you. Noah could probably tell. That's mainly because, when it comes to the larger thoughts or something I have to organize and reply to, I want to organize it and put it together and then put it back out there. And so sometimes I'm like, Slack requires you to conversation it, which, again, how you design the communication in your culture is actually critical in terms of how you get what culture you come out with, right? Before we leave this communication topic, recognition is I know where I always like to tie this back to recognition, because if you don't put recognition somehow in your culture, I've never seen one that succeeded, right? And to me, it doesn't have to be huge, but the finding ways to make sure people are still saying thank you and appreciating each other's work, that they can't walk past you in the cooler. If that's somehow built into how you communicate, like, hey guys, you're saying thank you to someone, here's how you do it, that's important, right? Cool.
Awesome. I love it. And while we're on that topic of recognition, you and I chatted about this a little bit, and I think this kind of goes back to like knowing who your people are. Of like, the hero recognition is happening a lot now that we're all on video and we're on that. Yeah. And so, Kwesi, I want you to dig into that, because I think you've got some really good examples about this. And there's a question in there right now that we'll jump into after you talk about this hero recognition.
Hero recognition. Sorry, I'm trying to organize my thoughts where to start. This is one of those passion areas for me on the hero recognition. There is really good value and really good research and information out there on these sort of more, I would call it hero recognition. These are your big get up in front of everyone, applause. It's the Emmys, it's the whatever else that we can kind of do, and we're doing it more often because we're virtual, and so we're doing the Zoom meeting with the team, and we're going to recognize someone in front of the team. And I just want us to remind us there is a portion of your population or your teams that type of recognition is more hurtful than helpful, because it causes more anxiety for them than you recognize. They don't want to be dragged up in front of everyone. They don't want to be on stage. They don't want to be, in front of everyone. And so finding ways to recognize that the people's individual needs and personalities of how to recognize them best is still very critical. And I think right now it's easy, and I hate using this word, but it's easy to sort of do the hero recognition because we're all on Zooms with our larger teams, et cetera. But that recognition that's directly one-on-one or that is in small group, or that is, meaningful for that individual, we still have to find ways to do that, and recognize that is good enough. Like that is important, and for some people that is more than good enough. You're harming going the other way. So a little, also depending on the culture you're building, sometimes hero awards create that sort of competitive, why him, why her, versus, the team building you want to do. So there's a bit of back and forth in terms of how, that you need to go through in terms of designing your recognition or how you execute your recognition. But introverts, as I've just put it in the QA, that does make for some stress for them.
Yeah, and like you said, not everyone wants that recognition, and also recognizing what kind of recognition people do want. Maybe they just want the thank you. Maybe they want the reward attached to whatever that reward may be, and because some people hold more value to that, and some people just want the hey, thanks for doing that. That was very lovely. I appreciated your help on that thing. And so and big thing here was how do you figure out what people want? How do you figure out what your team members prefer? What are your strategies there?
You just talk to your team. Hopefully you're having one-on-ones. Hopefully you're still having conversations, getting to know the people you're managing. Otherwise, you're not managing them. You're just leading. Sorry, you're managing them. You're not leading them, right? As a leader, you just have to get to know what your team members need. How do you motivate them? How do you recognize them? How do you word discipline is the wrong word. How do you pull them back where you need to go at something negative? But you've got to, talk and learn your team. And once you start doing that, you should, ask the question, hey, how do you, how do you want to be recognized, right? Or if you're going to recognize someone in a hero way and you're not sure, ask them before you do it. There's nothing wrong with talking to them beforehand. It doesn't need to be a surprise necessarily, right? So I think as leaders, it's on us to know and understand the people that we're leading, and then work with that as best as we can in terms of how we lead them.
Cool. Yeah, and like Jessica mentioned in the chat, it's they just asked employees. They did an exercise where employees expressed the ways they individually prefer to be recognized, and it was really helpful. Sarah mentioned they did a workplace appreciation quiz, and it's a great resource for managers to know how best to acknowledge their individual team members. These types of tools and surveys are pretty low lift, but the information you get out of it is invaluable, especially to managers, because then they can really know who their teams are and how they can help build them up and send them to their careers. And I want to bring that back to Shira's question here is how do you create a better experience for employees who have tenure through startup growing pains? We want to retain our talent, but sometimes they seem too far gone.
That's probably because they've been burnt out from doing all the startup heavy lifting. Trying to think. Sorry, I'm trying to think how to answer that. Man, that's a complex question. On one hand, I've seen through, with a couple of the startup companies I've worked with, Shopify, for example, and TradeGecko, et cetera, as they got through that and they start to go through past the initial startup phase into we're now a company, now we need to add layers of leadership or experience that we didn't have before. For some people, it was giving them the opportunity to learn, and that does not mean putting them in jobs that they're not ready for, but that's equipping them so that they could get ready for a job that they're not ready for today. So a lot of times that's leadership. It's normally I've got a great engineer, but they're not ready to be a director of engineer or a VP of engineer, but they've been here so early on, right? And so I think surrounding them with the tools and the resources and the training to get them to that level is a big one for retaining them. The second is sometimes recognizing that they may not want to go into the next role. I've had a couple, especially on the engineering side, I'll pick on engineers, really great startup engineers who just never didn't want to be executives in the engineering field, but they were influential. They had, we just let them grow with their title, but they never got people, as they never became people leaders. And the other one, and this one's the harder one for me to describe. Sometimes people are there for what we used to, a tour of duty. They're not the right person for that phase of the company, and sometimes that's okay. And I'm not saying that for everyone. I'm just saying sometimes that's okay. You're the VP of. I'm trying to pick another outside of engineering. The head of sales you had as a startup may not be the right person to run sales, when you're 2,000 employees and you've got a massive sales force. And so that's all okay as well. But I think in terms of retaining them, I think you really have to talk to them, understand where they are or where they want to be in their careers, and give them a path. Like we talk about career pathing in big companies a lot, but in small companies, actually it's probably more important, I find, because you really do have a clear, there's 100 of us or 50 of us. You can pretty much chart a path. You can chart a path pretty quickly in that environment. So, yeah, I think you can take that question offline as well. That one can go in different directions.
Yeah, I think like you kind of hit it. It's like really talking to them, figuring out where they are. And I love that you mentioned that like not everyone should stay through the growth phase. Like sometimes you have the right employee that will take you from 10 to 50 or 50 to 100, but that 200 plus, that's a whole different skill set that person may not have. And you might have to hire somebody else to come on top of them, or that person transitions out and another person comes in. And it doesn't mean that they were fired. It just means that they may not have had the right skill sets. And I think there's this big like scary, like, oh, you can never lose people. But sometimes the best thing you can do for an employee is transition them out and sort of build their career to the point where it's like, great, now you can move to the next stage at a different company. We're not the company for you at this stage, for that next stage, but we've given you all the resources and skills to get to that next stage at a different company, and we'll do everything we can to help you get there. That'll build an alumni network and build brand advocacy so well, even if that person still isn't at your organization.
Yeah, I mean, personally, it took me a while to figure out. I love the end to one phase. The one to many phase, when it kind of gets stable, I'm not a huge fan. So when there's nothing, I love that phase. I love being there where there's nothing or it's broken. I love fixing those things. And then once it's running and that you're now like into monthly and quarterly reconciliations and handovers and stuff like that, I'm the wrong person. And I think for me, it took me a while to figure that out. And some roles I didn't enjoy doing as much as I did when there was nothing. But I think I recognizing the time, the tour of duty or the right time for the right role is important, especially when growing a company from startup to larger.
Awesome. And like we're kind of coming up on the time where we start moving into Q&A, but I wanted to touch on something that like everyone's struggling with in this COVID world that we all live in, and that's the social and the team stuff. That's the like building those connections, making sure your team feels connected to each other, they feel connected to the leadership. What's working, what's not working, and I will plug in a little bit. In October, we are going to be doing another webinar with the team over at Wavy to specifically talk about team events. How do you run them? How do you build your team? How do you get those social interactions happening? So I want to get a little taste from Kwesi, but we'll be talking more about this with another expert in a couple of months.
Oh boy. Everyone's trying a lot of different ways. And again, this comes back to try a couple different ways, see what's working, and don't be ashamed to say, hey, that did not work, guys. We're not doing that again. Or, team, we're not doing that one again, right? So I have seen a few teams now, or a few companies now, that have done sort of the social Zoom calls where, somebody in HR has planned out whether it's a number of games. I've seen somebody who's done a dance party or, there's one company that I was working with in Toronto. I'm trying to remember their name right now. They did like a virtual DJ session, and literally everyone, like, they passed for lack of a word, the mic around, and they were all playing music while they were all working, but somebody else was playing music every 10 minutes or something like that. They just found ways to stay together, which again, some of them worked, some of them didn't. My dad, who's at TD, he does an Uber Eats lunch every month or every quarter. I can't remember how often he does it right now. But he literally, everyone orders Uber Eats and they have lunch together on Zoom. That's what he tries that. For me, you've got to know your team. Try a couple of the things you've seen other people doing. If it doesn't work for your team, don't be ashamed to say, hey, we tried to do online bingo. It didn't work. We won't do that again, team, but thanks for trying. And the forced executive buy-in, I'll throw that again, doesn't work. They just seem like they're not there on purpose again. I'd rather not have them on the call than have them being forced to call. If they're going to be on the call, they better be helping and leading, right? Because otherwise it just gets awkward, right? So, and I will say, recognition. Going back to recognition, one of the things that that we're seeing often is, or at least I know from using some of the recognition platforms lately, you're seeing more of the nomination or the sort of the nomination box type theory where people are nominating each other and they're getting together to celebrate those overachievers. Again, if done the right way, excellent. Done the wrong way, it can be detrimental. But I think if you're pulling the team together, definitely taking an opportunity to do as much as you can to let them socialize, talk to each other. It's really hard in a Zoom meeting, but let them try. I like some of the platforms that we're using, even though we're using today, which allows you to create rooms that people can go into a room and talk to people, and then come out and go into another room and talk to other people. So there are platforms that are getting a lot better, but this is a hard space.
Yeah. And I've talked to some other people about this, and like one thing that I thought was really interesting is there's one company that like every meeting they have, the first 5 minutes is their water cooler talk. And so people just chat for 5 minutes before their meeting and just kind of like talk about what they're doing and check in with each other. And usually the manager of the meeting is the one that's kind of leading and like checking in with each person, and then other people kind of start jumping in. But it's that first 5 minutes is just like, let's just connect as people for a minute before we dive into the agenda. And yeah. I think that's a really easy way to just start. And not everyone's going to do it, of course, and some managers will buy into it more than others, and some managers will be better at it than others. The small chat is not always easy, and I think we've all gotten a lot rustier at it over the past year and a half.
Yeah, definitely. I find that same Singapore executive I mentioned, he did not like he did that on purpose because he was not as a personality. It wasn't his personality to socialize. He would be like, "Okay, welcome to the meeting. Let's get started." Right. And so he baked that 5 minutes in for himself, even in the one-on-ones, to just be like, "Hey, how are you doing? How's vacation? Whatever it is." And it really started to percolate down the company that was a norm, and it helped well for them. But again, it matched to their culture they were trying to build.
Nice, cool. Yeah, I think that, like you said, there's no right answer here. It's figuring out what works for your team. And I think the big piece that I hope everyone takes away from this is that like experiment and don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to admit that failure and move on from it. All right, here's another question. What are some ways to motivate and engage employees as we mandate the return to the office? Need to keep morale up. Ooh, that's a tough one.
I don't know how to answer that one now.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer. I'd say if you're gonna mandate people come back to the office, if that's something that your leadership team has come to the conclusion that's the best thing to do, ice cream Fridays.
Free fruit and ice cream Fridays are always good.
Yeah. I think you really need to explain the why behind it with your team, and have that executive team sit down and maybe do an all hands and explain the why. Why are we all going back to the office? Why is this important for our company? Why is this? Why do we need to do this as an organization? I think that why piece is going to be really, really helpful, because if people understand the why behind the decision, they're more likely to buy into it. Even if they don't agree with the why, they're still more likely to actually buy into it. And I think the other thing is then have an open Q&A that people can express their concerns, and have the founders or executives or whomever address those concerns. I think letting people, for lack of a better word, vent towards your leadership team of why they don't like this, and ask questions and showcase their concerns, and have those concerns addressed in a meaningful way will, again, help create that buy-in, even if they don't really want to.
Yeah, there are definitely doing some of the easy bribery things is going to help ease the transition. But if you really can't explain or have a great communication plan about why or what the transition is, no matter how many ice creams or other things you do, you're still going to have a hell of a lot of resistance. I think if people can understand and get on board, they always move. They always move well or move easier into transition. So this would be a hard one, and a lot of companies are about to face this as they decide how to come back into the office space. Having the leader, I'm back to leaders again, having a leadership team really have a discussion about what they want and why they want it, not just, hey, come back to the office because you should be back in the office. That worked. And again, some people will leave, some people won't. I don't think you'll have mass exodus because of it. Very few companies have ever seen mass exodus because of a change like that, but it's you really have to have a conversation about why.
Yeah. I think that why piece is so important. We're coming up. We got 11:40. We're coming up on that sort of like we got about 5-10 minutes left for Q&A. Add your questions in here. We'll answer them but I'm also going to jump into the questions that people submitted when they registered. So I'm going to start sort of just jumping up here, and I think this is a good one. We haven't really addressed it yet. Is the equity between remote employees and in-office employees, because a lot of companies are taking that hybrid approach. And so how do you keep things equal between your remote team and your in-office team and make sure that, if you have a manager in office with some members in office and some members out of office, how do you make sure that those team members are all sort of being treated equally, there's equitably, and everyone's kind of getting a fair chance at promotions and projects, and the in-person team isn't being treated better or getting more perks than the remote team. So, Kwesi, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, I was trying to figure out where the question was going. I was trying to figure out how to answer some of the things you just said. This is all the world according to Kwesi, or how I see them. None of this is right. Just want to put that proviso out there. I mean, I struggle because you said a couple words in there that I as a leader, this is how I approach them. I normally tell my teams up front, I'm trying to be fair. That's how I am. But the fair is not equal. And that's fair is fair. And that's may not be equal all the time. I just want to point that out at the start, because those two words are in that question: fair, equal, same. And it's like, I'm trying to be fair, right? And so how you manage the two teams, how you spend the time, how you look at opportunities like promotions, et cetera, you try to be fair in them. You take those things on an approach that takes some of the biases away, and you try to be fair, right? You're not going to have the cooler chats that you're going to with a remote employee that you're going to have with an employee in person. There's no way to change that other than to say, hey, I just spoke to someone at the cooler. I'm going to spend 5 minutes talking to Bob on FaceTime because we got to make sure I can be equal all the time. That's not going to happen. So I think in the big things like promotions or project opportunities, et cetera, on leadership, on the manager or leader side, you really got to step back and look at the opportunities and make sure you're being fair and taking some of those natural biases, like, hey, we hang out every day and see you every day, so it's more natural for me to give you this project. You've got to take some of those biases out and really look at the people and the work and be fair to them in that sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that, and I think it trickles down to even something as simple as meetings. Is like, if you have remote employees engaging in a meeting, then maybe your in-office team should also be dialing into that meeting remotely, and they're all on their laptop in different spots in the office, just so it's not 5 people in a room and 1 person on a screen, because that person on the screen is never going to be able to say anything unless they're specifically called upon. Yeah,
you have to moderate that meeting. You have to moderate that meeting more than you used to have to do that before COVID, right? When you'd have one person remotely and you say, hey, do you have anything to say? At the end of the meeting, as you're all walking out, you go, hey, Bob, before we hang up, you have anything to ask? You got to really moderate that meeting as a leader now. It puts a lot more work on the leader or whoever's leading those meetings to make sure that, again, that the conversation is fair. People have had a chance to talk through it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where the thing is, like, trying to level the playing field as much as you can in some regards when you have those remote employees and those in-office employees, is like, try and put everyone as much as you can on the same level. Like what you said, is fair is not always equal. I say that to my kids all the time. Fair is not always equal.
Fair is not always equal.
Yeah. Right. And I've even had to say it to employees, because they're like, well, why, what's happening over there? I'm like, well, they need that. And they're like, well, that doesn't seem fair. I'm like, well, just because it's not the same as you doesn't mean that it's not fair.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Another one here is this, like, is the time zone thing. And so, like, as people are going more remote, and you've got hybrid, and you're going to have more office locations, more people across all different time zones, is how do you maintain that connection across time zones? Because, someone who's out in Halifax is only going to have like a 2-hour overlap or 3-hour overlap with someone who's based out on the West Coast or in another country. And so how do you make sure that they're still, if they're on the same team, having connections and being able to collaborate? And what tools and sort of strategies have you seen work for that type of multi-time zone communication?
Yeah, so this I experienced for about 2 years as one of the companies I was supporting with Trade Gecko. They were based in Singapore, and I was based in Toronto, and we had two teams, Toronto and Singapore, and so there was very little to no overlap in terms of working hours, in terms of those two time zones. And so when we did not plan this out, it was actually very difficult because the head office was in Singapore, Toronto was a smaller office, and so the Toronto team was working 9 to 5 or whatever they're working in the day, and then putting in 3-4 hours at night on phone calls with Asia. And because it wasn't planned, it was actually becoming a very big problem for the Toronto team. They had no balance. They had no work-life balance. It can be any night, all night, 3 nights, 4 nights a week. And so for a lot of times what we did was we established the days or times that we were going to ensure we were crossing over. So if we're with that example, we picked, Tuesdays and Thursdays are our late night meetings, and we made it okay for people to not work or work half the day because they're doing 3-4 hours of meetings at night, so that they could overlap, right? But you had to create that balance and plan it out, and not just expect that people would work all day and then the calls at night. So making sure to give that time back was important in that scenario. With teams that are closer together where there is an overlap, we made sure that, a lot of teams, a few companies, plan and say, hey, these 3 or 4 or 2, 3, 4 hour overlaps, like, you got to be in office for those 3-4 hours of overlap, because that's the 3 hour 4 hours of productivity between the teams. And so again, this all comes back to planning this out as how this works best for your team and your culture, planning an overlap, giving people back the time if they're working on a constant basis. If every Tuesday night you're doing meetings for 3 hours, then give them the time back, so that eventually so that it is balanced. And then the tools, again, if you're using, whether it's Hangouts, Zoom, WebEx, Teams, you've got lots of ways to collaborate now. I'm a big advocate on the tech side for picking one as a group and sticking to, and kind of all kind of using the same medium, so you're not losing every 10 minutes every phone call wondering what link you're got to open. It's like we always use blah blah blah. Not promoting which one it should use in whichever one of the platforms. Just pick one and make it common, right?
Yeah. I think like I was chatting with the head of talent over at Vidyard, and obviously they do this, it's their platform, but they use a lot of videos to communicate as well. And so across different time zones of like, I'm just gonna like record a quick video of like what I did during my day and send that to my team who are just starting their day. And so just like, here's a 5-minute video of like, I did this is the roadblock that still needs to be addressed by your team, and here's the information, and here's the place you can find it. And these are the things that I'm going to be looking at tomorrow. If you have any questions, please send them to me in Slack. And so just having those like short videos was really big for them. And it was also how they onboarded people. Everyone did a short video introduction of who they were, what team they were on, and all that kind of stuff. And then that was pinned to their Slack profile. And so anyone could watch that little video before they had a meeting with that person, if it was the first time they had that meeting, so they could get a little context of who that person was.
Like they were using their own product very well.
Yeah, they were definitely really using their own product as much as they could, which I think, if you can, why wouldn't you? Yeah, right. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions and concerns around like keeping employees engaged, team building, communication, connection, and I think we've touched on a lot of that just through our conversation here today. I think there's one thing here that we've kind of not addressed but talked about a lot, is this a lot of reliance on tech. How do you reduce that reliance if you have multi-generational workforces who aren't comfortable with some of that tech that your younger generations are very comfortable with? So if you have some, older generations who don't want to be downloading Zoom and all these new communication tools and don't like it, how do you make sure that they're still feeling included and they're still getting access and are still being treated fairly as members of your team?
Trying to figure out how to answer that question, because
it's a hard one.
It's a hard one, because at some point you do have to use some technology to talk to somebody or speak to someone who's not in the same room as you, right? And whether that technology is one of the platforms, phone call, FaceTime, etc., you've got something has to work. I think for me, I'd probably spend a little bit of time, money, probably in whatever that platform or mode is, and giving them the support to get it set up and making them feel comfortable using it. Because you're going to have to use some sort of communication tools. Again, I would probably not try to have 5 of them. I'd probably have one and say, hey, we helped you get set up on Zoom. We didn't just say, go get it up. We helped you get through it, made sure you're all set and you knew how to use it well. I don't know how else you get around that from a day-to-day perspective. The other mode, which are more the in-person, I mean, you've really got technology in person. I'm not sure if maybe I'm missing something blindly on this one, but the in-person, as much as you can do and make sure they're connecting in ways that they're comfortable with, great, right? Sorry, somebody slacked me. Noah, I wasn't sure if you were telling me to say something else. Okay, no, but I think for me, you've got to help them with the technology. That's the easiest way.
Nice.
But again, hopefully 1 or 2, not all 5.
Mm-hmm. And I think Jamie just put something in the chat that I thought was really is having a buddy system, having somebody that person can go to when they have issues or help them learn that instead of because then they know exactly who they can go to for help and all that kind of stuff, and they're not having to reach out to like IT support or someone in the HR team. They can just be like, I know I can ping Kwesi, and Kwesi's going to help me figure this out, or I can ping Kwesi and he's going to help me set up this new technology. And then more how-to, support training, QAs, drop-in sessions, just like making it easy for them as much as possible.
Yeah, you got to help. Help with the tools, right? That's the main, I think, thing you can do is help equip them with the tools and help them feel comfortable with it, so that they aren't having that struggle.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the theme of today is like making it as easy as possible for people to communicate and learn and collaborate, and how you do that for your team is going to be unique to you, but using things like communication and expectation setting and making sure your leadership is also sort of stepping in and modeling those behaviors as much as possible is going to get you really far when it comes to creating culture, maintaining that culture, and in this not new, hybrid remote world.
Yeah, I mean, the same things goes for, I know Slack is becoming more and more, or messengers are becoming more and more common for companies to use. Even that, I poses some challenges for people who are, deep rooted in email, right? And they want a bigger email that's more formal that they can go through, work through the bullet points and respond. And so, again, thinking through how the communication is going to work and the norms of their organization is important as we try to work in this new environment.
Yeah. I think I'm going to kind of wrap things up there, and I'm going to invite Kevin Chow, one of our members here at Gusto, up onto the stage. And so this is strictly, you don't have to stick around for this if you don't want to, but Kevin is a member of our team over here at Gusto. And if you're interested in just chatting with Kevin and learning a bit more about the Gusto platform and how we sort of use recognition internally and how we help clients communicate recognition and use Gusto to make sure that their teams are feeling connected and collaborated, feel free to chat with Kevin. You can chat here on the chat. You can ask him to invite you up on stage and have a conversation, or you can email him and set that up as well. But Kevin, if you just want to like give us a quick pitch of like what you're going to be talking about, the little promo that we're given here, that'd be great. And then Kwesi and I will go leave you to it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Noah. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Perfect. So, the little pitch about what Gusto does is to kind of build on everything that we spoke about so far today. It's really about driving that culture of recognition, value, empowering your employees, right? So a lot of questions today about how to make other people feel valued. How do we kind of create that culture of like, when someone does something good around the office, you'd walk over the desk, give them a pat on the back and say, hey, great job. But how do we take that online? So a lot of things like that is how we've built that into our platform, and really taking everything that used to be in person online, streamlining that process, being able to be really data driven about who's kind of giving rewards, what kind of rewards are being resonating with other employees, on all those different kind of things. So a little promotion we're giving for this webinar is if you sign up for our Teams package here, we'll give a year of the nominations box. And what that nominations box is, it's a peer-to-peer real-time recognition tool. So for instance, following this webinar, I'm probably gonna give Noah and Kwesi here a little nomination for saying a great job and taking time out of the day to do this. And that's free to anyone who signs up for Teams today, as well as any current customers who doesn't have the nomination box currently. So with that said, we'll let Noah and Kwesi off. And if anyone wants to further chat about the platform, what they're currently doing, just more about the employee recognition space in general, you can either pop into the chat or I can invite you guys onto stage. You can just kind of continue the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. And the webinar that's we're going to be hosting with Decium coming up next month. That's going to be coming up on our website with all the information just in the next few days. So, and we'll also be sending it out in our newsletter. So if you're not on our newsletter, go check it out, sign up. And that's where we, talk about our webinars every month and resources that we're seeing online and all that kind of good stuff. So again, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks for the commentary in the chat. I love the questions. I love the commentary. I love people sharing what they're doing. That's what this is all about. Community. We're sharing what we're doing. We're trying to all be a little bit better together. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all for listening to myself and Noah talk today. If you've got wanted to further ask any questions or chat further about this stuff, feel free to hit to message me on LinkedIn. I think my link is there somewhere, and I'm happy to talk about any of this. Excellent.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
And I'll be sticking around for anyone who wants to continue the conversation as well. Awesome, Carrie. Did you want to jump on the chat here as well, or did you just want to continue the conversation over email? Like, do you have a hard stop at 12 or 12 PST? Sure thing. So I dropped my email, but I'll send it here again. And you can go ahead and send me a quick email. And you can also, probably this is the best way, and then we can continue the conversation on email. Hope to talk to you soon, Carrie. Hey, Yvonne, Susie, Jasmine, Allison, Jeanette, any of you guys interested in chatting a little bit more, or do you guys forget to close your web page? All right, then for everyone else still on this call, I've popped my email into the chat box there. And if you guys want to continue that conversation, feel free to hit me up. I'll just say my email over the chat here as well. It's Kevin, KEVIN CHAO @gusto.com. And feel free to reach out to me, if not even about the promotion or any sales, just to learn more about the space. Or if you wanted me to help you connect to Noah or Kwesi, feel free to reach out to me for that as well. And if that is it for everyone, I hope everyone has a great day. And thank you for attending. And I hope you guys attend our webinar next month with Decium. Bye.